The Empire took every weapon from Kestrel Deep before it took the colony. Rifles first, then the mining charges, the emergency cutters, the flare pistols, and the old hand tools that could be modified into something dangerous by a determined person. The inspectors worked for 9 hours. At the end, Prefect Keth stood in the colony's central square and announced that humanity had been made harmless. Chief Engineer Anika Rao listened beneath the shadow of a drilling tower. Above her, the occupation fleet descended through the clouds. Its landing engines turned the sky white. Anika touched the scratched brass survey weight hanging from her belt. The weight trembled against her glove. The ground was already moving. She opened the mine-wide channel. "Do not fire," she said. 180 voices answered at once. "What do we do?" Anika watched the first Imperial carrier lower toward the western extraction field. "Make them stand somewhere else." Kestrel Deep was not a military settlement. It was a mining colony built around a planet-sized seam of iridescent iron, the only material in the sector capable of carrying power through folded space without burning out. The colony had 1,800 workers for schools, 2 medical stations, and 9 kilometers of reinforced shaft beneath the surface. It had no army. That was why the Vaer Empire had come. 3 months earlier, the Empire had declared Kestrel Deep a strategic asset. The declaration gave it the right to occupy the mine, control its exports, and remove any human equipment classified as a potential weapon. The humans had protested through 6 channels. The Empire had answered with 1 inspection fleet. Prefect Keth arrived in a white administrative shuttle. He was tall, narrow, and covered in overlapping gray plates that reflected the colony's dust storms. He spoke as if every sentence had already become law. "Human disarmament is complete," he announced. "Your industrial tools remain because the Empire recognizes the difference between work and war." Anika had almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she signed the inventory. The Empire removed 32 rifles, 14 cutting charges, 6 emergency launchers, and every explosive used to break the deepest rock. It left the vector drill. It left the hydraulic pressure pumps. It left the 9-kilometer survey winch. The inspectors had classified each machine by its approved purpose. A drill was for stone. A pump was for water. A winch was for ore. Anika had spent 20 years learning what those machines actually did when pressure changed. She had also learned never to confuse a label with a limit. The first Imperial carrier descended toward the western extraction field. Anika opened the geological display in her helmet. The colony's original survey map showed 3 buried voids beneath the field, each created by a collapsed branch of the old mine. The voids were stable. They were also connected. The landing field had been built over them because stable ground was cheaper than rebuilding the western road. Anika had signed that construction order 7 years earlier. She had never expected an army to land there. "Status," she said. "Vector drill ready," answered Jalen Rusk, her deputy engineer. "Pressure pumps. Powered and linked to the lower shaft. Survey winch. The counterweight is still attached to the old elevator cage. That cage holds. On a good day. Today is not a good day. No, then make it useful." The Imperial carrier touched the western field. Its landing legs extended. The ground answered with a low vibration. Anika felt it through her boots. She lifted the brass survey weight and watched it swing. The weight had been her first tool in Kestrel Deep. It had no sensor, no power cell, and no data link. It was only brass hanging from a braided line. But it told the truth about movement. The weight swung east. The carrier's mass was loading the buried void. "Begin the vector drill," Anika said. Jalen hesitated. "That puts the drill beneath the landing field." "Yes. If the field shifts before the carrier unloads, it will not shift before the carrier unloads." "How do you know?" Anika looked at the weight. "Because the ground is warning us." The vector drill began beneath the colony. It was designed to bore through rock at an angle, following a seam without opening the surface. The drill head turned slowly through the western bed, cutting a narrow channel toward the first buried void. The Imperial carrier opened its cargo doors. 6 armored walkers descended. Prefect Keth broadcast across the colony. Remain in place. Imperial security personnel will assume control of all industrial operations. Anika replied on the public channel. Your carrier is standing on a known subsidence zone. Keth answered immediately. Your colony has been disarmed. That is not what I said. You said the ground is unsafe. I said your carrier is standing on a known subsidence zone. Then your engineers should have reported it. We did. 7 years ago. For a moment, the only sound on the channel was the carrier's engines. The Empire had inspected weapons. It had not inspected old warnings. The drill reached the void. Anika watched the brass weight. The swing changed. Stop drilling. Jalen killed the motor. The colony fell quiet except for the carrier's engines. Anika switched to the pressure pump channel. Open valves 3 and 5. The pumps began moving water from the lower shaft into the newly cut channel. The water did not flood the void. It entered slowly, changing the pressure beneath the field by degrees. The first landing leg sank 2 centimeters. The walker stopped. The carrier corrected its balance. Anika, Jalen said, we have a carrier load warning. Keep the pressure steady. Steady how? Steady enough that they notice. The landing field shifted another centimeter. The carrier's engines brightened. Anika had expected the carrier's safety system to prevent a lift while the legs were carrying uneven load. That was why she had allowed the pressure to rise this far. It was a reasonable assumption. It was also her first mistake. If the carrier lifted suddenly, its exhaust would scatter across the colony's western housing block. If it stayed, its landing legs would sink into the unstable field. Anika sent a second message. Do not lift. Prefect Keth answered. Are you threatening an Imperial carrier with a mining machine? No. Then what are you doing? Giving you a safe choice. The carrier remained still. Anika heard Imperial command channels opening and closing behind Keth's voice. The fleet had expected a surrendered colony, not a landing surface that required negotiation. Then another voice entered the channel. Marshal Dog Vey was the fleet commander. His voice was deep and metallic. Human engineer, release your industrial systems. They are civilian systems. Then they cannot affect my fleet. That depends on where your fleet stands. Vey did not order the first carrier to lift. Instead, he opened a tactical map. The western field was compromised. The eastern field was older, but the map showed broad sections of reinforced ground. A second carrier began its descent. Anika's stomach tightened. The eastern field is not reinforced, she said. Vey answered on the public channel. The Empire has verified the landing coordinates. You verified a map, not the ground. Your warning has been recorded. Then act on it. I am. The second carrier entered the atmosphere. The sound rolled over Kestrel Deep. Children in the eastern school pressed their hands to the windows. Workers stood beside the sealed mine gates, watching the ship descend through the dust. Jalen pulled up the lower shaft schematic. The eastern field sits above the old counterweight chamber, he said. If we release the survey winch, the surface will settle into the abandoned lower chambers. Not completely. Not if we stop the drop before the main support ribs go. What happens to the mine? Jalen looked at her. You know what happens. The lower shaft held enough or to keep Kestrel Deep alive for another 30 years. Without it, the colony would survive only if the Empire allowed it to. We can move the carrier without opening the shaft, Jalen said. Use the pressure pumps on the east field. Shift the load back toward the landing engines. The carrier might rise safely. Yes. It might slide toward the school. Yes. Then no. Chief, if we release the counterweight, we lose the lower shaft. Not yet. Then what are we waiting for? Anika looked at the survey weight. The brass weight swung toward the eastern field. The wrong choice to become visible. The second carrier lowered its landing legs. Marshal Vey ordered the first carrier to prepare for a controlled lift. Anika's mistake was becoming a second danger. She had trusted the Imperial safety system to protect the colony from its own carrier. Vey had recognized the uneven field and chosen speed over procedure. His decision was not irrational. It was simply based on the belief that the ground was passive. Jalen, Anika said, prepare the survey winch. He understood. The winch had once moved ore cages between the lower shaft and the surface. Its cable ran through a pulley tower and down to a counterweight buried beneath the eastern field. If we release it, Jalen said, the mine is finished. If we do not, the school may be. The second carrier touched the eastern field. The ground gave a soft, deep groan. Anika closed her eyes. She could still see the lower shaft as it had been when she was 19. Wet stone, yellow lamps, the old cage trembling over the dark. Her career had started there. So had the colony's future. She opened the mine-wide channel. All crews, move to the north shelters. Do not enter the lower shaft. Repeat, do not enter the lower shaft. One voice answered, What are you doing? Anika looked at the brass weight. Making room. The counterweight dropped. The lower shaft opened beneath the eastern field. The surface did not explode. It folded. A long crack moved through the landing zone, following the old mine line. The second carrier's left landing leg sank into the opening. Its right engines fired automatically, pushing the ship sideways. Anika opened the pressure valves. Water moved through the western drill channel. The first carrier shifted away from the colony road. For 3 seconds, both ships moved exactly as Anika had predicted. Then the first carrier's safety system issued a lift command. Anika stared at the telemetry. The automatic system had not prevented the lift. It had reclassified the unstable legs as an external obstruction and was attempting to free the vessel. Her assumption had been wrong. The engines rose in pitch. The exhaust vector turned toward the western housing block. Jalen looked at her. Can you redirect the pressure? No. Can you stop the carrier? Not from here. The brass weight began to swing toward the residential block. Anika had planned for the landing. She had planned for the collapse. She had not planned for the safety system to make the danger worse. That was the limit of her model. She ran to the old winch control room. Jalen followed. The room shook as the eastern field settled. The control panel had no digital interface. It had 3 levers, 2 pressure gauges, and a brass plate worn smooth by generations of miners. Anika pulled the emergency brake. Nothing happened. The brake cable had been cut during the Imperial inspection. Jalen swore. The first carrier's engines reached full power. Its exhaust began to whiten the windows of the western housing block. Anika looked at the old survey weight in her hand. The braided line was still attached. She threaded it through the brake lever. Hold this, she said. That will not stop a carrier. It will stop the winch. The winch is pulling the counterweight. Exactly. She wrapped the line around the lever and pulled. The brass weight swung once, struck the control housing, and jammed the lever halfway. The counterweight stopped falling. The eastern field stopped settling. The first carrier was still rising. Anika switched to its internal emergency frequency. Pilot, this is the civilian engineer controlling your ground support. A frightened voice answered. Release us. I will if you cut your engines. We will crash. You will settle. Your landing legs are still carrying load. And if you are wrong, Anika looked through the window at the colony road. Then I will be standing beneath you. The pilot hesitated. Marshal Vey broke into the frequency. Do not obey her. Lift. Anika heard the order and understood the final problem. The pilot was trapped between procedure and command. The carrier's safety system wanted a lift. The marshal wanted force. Neither one was measuring the people beneath the exhaust. Anika spoke to the pilot again. Your left legs are carrying load. Your right engines are pushing across a live void. You have 11 seconds before the Plume reaches the housing block. How do you know? Because I built the field you are standing on. Your people will die if I cut power. They will die if you keep it. Another second passed. Then the pilot cut the engines. The carrier dropped half a meter. The ground absorbed it. The second carrier followed. For 11 seconds, both ships remained silent above the mine. Then the first carrier's weapons lowered automatically. The Imperial safety system would not permit firing while the vessel was unstable. The walker stopped. The occupation force stood on the mining field, unable to advance without making the ground worse. Marshal Vey returned to the public channel. You turned civilian infrastructure into a military trap. Anika looked at the collapsed eastern field, the damaged western road, and the darkened housing block windows. No, she said. You turned a mine into a battlefield. You caused this collapse. I chose where it could happen. You destroyed your own mine. To keep the colony above it alive. We will return with orbital support. Then inspect the geology before you land. The Marshal did not answer. Anika continued. Your fleet is not defeated. Your weapons are intact. Your soldiers are alive. You can leave without casualties. The silence lasted longer this time. Prefect Oryu and Keth came onto the channel. I used no weapon, Anika said before he could speak. Keth searched for a response that sounded like law. The drill had not attacked the carrier. The pumps had not fired at the walkers. The winch had not exploded. Each machine had done exactly what it had been built to do. The humans had simply understood that work could move more than stone. Doc Vey ordered the fleet to withdraw. The carriers lifted one at a time, carefully, using the colony's pressure readings to avoid the unstable fields. Their walkers returned to the ships. Their weapons remained dark. No human had fired a shot. Kestrel Deep had still paid for its survival. The lower shaft was gone. 30 years of were gone with it. The old elevator cage remained at the bottom of the collapsed chamber, its cable wrapped around the brass survey weight that had held the emergency brake long enough to save the surface. After the fleet left, Anika stood above the sealed shaft. Jalen stood beside her. Was it worth it, he asked. Anika looked toward the schools, the medical stations, and the workers gathered behind the safety line. No, she said. Jalen looked surprised. She touched the brass weight in her hand. Worth is what you calculate before you lose something. This was necessary. The Empire filed a protest within 2 days. The colony's legal team submitted the original disarmament inventory as evidence. The vector drill was listed as a civilian boring machine. The pressure pumps were flood control equipment. The survey winch was an ore handling system. The Empire had signed every page. The protest collapsed in committee. 3 months later, the Vair Empire amended its disarmament treaty. Occupying forces could no longer remove weapons while ignoring the civilian systems that controlled landing fields, pressure networks, transport locks, power conduits, and the ground beneath an army. The clause was called the Kestrel Provision. It was written as a warning about humanity. It became an admission that the Empire had never understood the difference between harmless and unfamiliar. Years later, a young engineer asked Anika why the colony had not hidden a weapons cache. Anika took the brass survey weight from its hook and placed it in the engineer's palm. It was still scratched, still heavy, still incapable of firing a shot. Because they were looking for weapons, she said. What were we supposed to hide? Anika closed the young engineer's fingers around the weight. The reason the tools exist. Above Kestrel Deep, the old western field had been rebuilt as a garden. The eastern mine never reopened. At its center stood a small brass marker beside the sealed shaft. It carried one line. A tool is only harmless to people who never learned what it was for. If this story made you look differently at the tools around you, tell us which ordinary machine would become dangerous in the right hands, and subscribe to Kalevorn for another record from the Galactic Archive.